What's up, guys? So, welcome to the podcast. Today, we've got a guest. I saw her compete, as I'll mention this in a second. Saw her compete at the ADCC trials, and she looked great. I was like super tough. I didn't know who she was, and she went against some tough competitors. And for me, like, we're gonna have a few guests on in the near future that were on the trials, and I basically picked out the people that had styles that I enjoyed watching. There were some people that had like really, to me, exciting matches, fun matches, aggressive styles that, again, that in itself was just like, I want to talk to this person because I like watching their jiu-jitsu. Simple as that. And so we've got Amy Campo. She's on the podcast with us today. She is the trials winner, the West Coast trials, and she is going out to go to the ADCC championships. And so we talked to her about everything from training and jiu-jitsu competitions and all that stuff and everything in between. And hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast. As always, thanks to our sponsors who help make the podcast happen. Our main sponsor that's been with us for a long time now, is like 4 years now, Charlotte's Web. If you guys have ever been interested in trying CBD, I encourage you to go to their website at charlottesweb.com and try some of their products. CBD is one of those things where, because it's not FDA approved, you can't say a lot of things, right? The things you can say is that it helps manage everyday stress. It can help maintain healthy sleep cycles. It can assist with recovery from exercise-induced inflammation, and it can help support a sense of calm for focus. Now, for me personally, I like using it for my on the recovery side of it. I feel like it helps support my sleep cycles. It helps me get a better night's rest. Personally, that's what I feel. And again, I've noticed that from a lot of people. They say the same thing. And so I like using it for that, because if my sleep's good, then my training day is going to be good. I'm going to be more productive during the day. I'm going to feel better. And I have noticed too that if anybody has ever experienced a lot of like stress or anxiety or something like that, I feel like sometimes it can help with the management of that stress. And so that's personally why I like it. And again, I encourage everybody to try it and see what you think and see if it helps you out as well. Again, you can go to their website at charlottesweb.com. The promo code for it to save some money is Jiu-Jitsu20. You'll save 20% off the order. That's a different code now, because if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, it used to be Chewjitsu. Now it's Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. So if you want to get some of their products, check them out on their website. Right now I use the tincture. Every now and then I'll pop a gummy during the middle of the day. Sometimes if I'm working, sometimes I'll pop I found if I do a heavier dose, it's too much. Like if I do, like, for instance, for me personally, if I do like 60 milligrams, dude, I'm not.
You do like a half?
I just do like one gummy, so it's like 5 milligrams. It's like not much at all, but that helps out. But if I do too much, it makes me like super lethargic.
Like sleepy.
Yeah, great for sleeping, just not great for if I'm trying to get some work done in the middle of the day.
And some people kind of, I feel like I feel good with it. I don't take a bunch. Like I take in the morning, and then I'll take sleep gummies or some gummies at night. But like I think it helps kind of level me out. I feel pretty good in the mornings when I take it. Some people get a little energetic. Some people get sleepy. So it just depends on, test it out and see how you feel.
Depends on the person for sure.
Yep.
And then also, guys, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. Matt is the owner. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt who makes gear for jiu-jitsu people. He has rash guards, shorts, gis, t-shirts. I mean, everything, jiu-jitsu gear, jiu-jitsu merch, all the stuff in between. And again, I like the designs. It's good quality stuff. And I've done some partnerships with him in the past for our school and everything else. And so I really like his stuff. And so if you want to check him out, you can go to the website at EpicRollBJJ.com. And the promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off of the order on whatever you buy. The only exclusions to that are his branded stuff with like McDojo or Mason Fowler and a couple other people, but everything else you'll save that 15% off on. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. All right, guys. So again, thanks to our sponsors, Acorn. They've got a really cool thing going on. So check this out. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this, but imagine, if you will, that all of the spare change that you've accumulated over your lifetime, right? Like say from the time that you were young till now, if you could take all that spare change and have invested it into a particular portfolio for like finances and stuff like that. Imagine how much money you would probably have at this point. And I think it's a really cool thing that they're doing. So basically they have this app where it basically sort of makes the process of investing seamless in the background. So you don't have to really think about it. So you have a couple different ways you can use it. One is that you can, every time you get paid, you can set up deposits from it, like you would anything else. But I think the really cool thing that it does is every time you link it up with your bank account, your card, and every time you use that card, it rounds up, and the spare change that you have
goes towards whatever portfolios you have invested in. And again, I think that's a really cool thing, because I think a lot of people, they either get overwhelmed or something they don't have the time to think about. Because again, like all of us, technology is a way of, it's supposed to make life simpler and more like efficient, but in turn it sort of makes everything more cumbersome, and you seem to have less time, even though the technology's gotten so much better, right? But this is a really cool technology, and basically it's a simple app that you set up. And again, if you guys want to check it out, you can check it out by going to acorns.com/jujitsu, and they're giving a really generous bonus right now. So basically you invest $5, and in turn for investing that $5, you get $20 a bonus to invest. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You just made $15. So again, I think it's a really cool app, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor. And again, if you guys want to check them out, you can go to acorns.com/jujitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com.
And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the-Chewjitsu-podcast. In there, we have a lot of extra content that we haven't released anywhere else, including videos and podcast extras, interviews with guests that have been on the podcast, the whole nine. And again, if you want to check that out, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the-Chewjitsu-podcast. And guys, if you want to join my Chew Crew email newsletter, where you become an email subscriber and get access to 3 free ebooks, as well as get my daily newsletter, you can do so by going to jujitsu.net/join, JOIN, and you can join, and you can unsubscribe at any time and keep those ebooks for free. So guys, with that said, let's jump into the podcast with Amy. I sent you the message to get you on the podcast because I saw you out at the trials compete. I'm sure like a lot of people, and so when Eugene and I were we were trying to find some more guests and stuff. I just like having people on that have like a style that I like watching. And I was like, well, like at the trials, I mean, you were going for a lot of wrestling. You were dominant with the wrestling, the takedowns, and everything else, and the guard passing. And I had a lot of fun watching it. I thought you were super, super aggressive. It was a good style to watch, and so we wanted to have you on the podcast and talk with you. I'm curious, how did you get started with training? Like, how did you get into jiu-jitsu?
Ooh, so my brother used to get in a lot of street fights. My brother Ryder, him and I trained together. And my dad brought him to a martial arts gym so that he could actually learn how to fight and to learn maybe how to control himself a little bit.
Okay.
So he was just dropping him off one day and offered me to come for the ride. And we sat and watched a little bit of class. And while I watched class, he looks at me and he goes, "So you think you want to do this?" And I was like, just not. I really didn't think anything would come out of it. My mom was super conservative right then. And so he signs me up for all of the classes, all of them, and buys me all of the gear for them that day. And then I just trained every class pretty much since.
How old were you when you started?
I started when I was 13.
Okay. What was like your life kind of before jiu-jitsu at like athletically or just in general? What did you like to do as a kid?
So as a kid, I wasn't a part of any sports or anything, though I liked them. I did dance for like a year or two, but that was the extent of it. I've always been pretty active and I like doing things. I like sports. I like activities, but I was never a part of any sports groups or anything. Love learning. I love developing myself and developing skills. So anything I could grab to learn would be awesome. But my mom was super conservative. She was worried about money all the time. So we didn't do very much.
Gotcha. So how long into it, like, because obviously you're deep into jiu-jitsu now and you're competing at a high level and everything else, but when you were younger, like when did it start to like click on you that you're like, I really like this? Because obviously you get started with something and you get going with it, but then there, at least for me, there was a point where with like wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I was like, okay, I really, really like this. This makes me very happy and I want to do this more than I want to do anything else. Did you have a moment like that or a period of time where that started to shift into place?
So I would say I took to it like day one.
Okay.
Because I wanted something to latch onto and to learn. But as far as when I knew like this was for me, I don't know if I ever had that moment because I feel like as soon as I started, it was like, well, yeah, of course. What else would I be doing? It was never really a question, I guess.
Okay.
And so like, did you feel like you were good at it? Did you have success off the bat? Were you frustrated all at the beginning? You know, being in a gym, never really done anything like jiu-jitsu before. Were you kind of like, what was your experience initially?
Yeah, I lost a lot initially, but it never bothered me that I would lose to something because I just didn't know what I was doing, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna try to do better. And I never knew how good I was at it. My coach always thought I did really well, and I was like, well, I don't know what that means. I'm just trying to fight you and not get submitted. Literally, the first year of training, my entire goal was to just not let you do whatever you wanted to do and be as obnoxious as possible. And then I started to actually get things on people, and I was like, oh, hey, I can do things. And that was cool.
Yeah, that was like the early on. Like I was talking to one of the white belts about this today. I was like, he was asking about just like what the sort of the progression is, and I was like, in the beginning, you're just gonna like try to like stay alive on the mat and not get submitted. If you can do that, that's a step in the right direction, and eventually you'll start to, like you said, be kind of obnoxious and hard to submit, and then things start sort of working up from there. Now I'm curious, did you wrestle at some point, or did you just pick up your wrestling from jiu-jitsu?
From jiu-jitsu. I mean, my coach had an MMA class that I did for a couple years, and that was all, jiu-jitsu for MMA, like jiu-jitsu for a fight. So all of my wrestling, so to speak, is just from that.
Okay, because you had some good takedowns at the trials, and I wasn't sure if you had done some wrestling previously, or it was just the stuff that you picked up from jiu-jitsu.
No, my coach is also a black belt in judo from Japan, so I do have some judo from him.
Okay, so it's where some of those, maybe the influence on those throws came from.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself more of a top or a bottom player with your game?
I don't know. I play both positions because with somebody bigger than you, if you end up on the bottom, you develop your guard. You develop how to use it, how to move, how to get out from under someone, how to sweep well.
Sure.
But then as soon as you sweep, then you're on top. And with somebody bigger or with anybody, you just want to be on top. You'd want to be having gravity on your side, passing, having pressure, being dominant, having submissions. So I just learned to play on both.
Okay. Have you had a situation where, because I know a lot of times in like, a lot of women that go to jiu-jitsu competitions run into this where they get there and there's not a ton of women. So they just like especially some of the regional tournaments that are just like local ones, they'll just smash divisions together, and you'll have like this massive like weight difference and stuff like that. Have you run into that a lot as you've gone up and through competitions?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the biggest girl I've fought so far was like 238 pounds. I fought her when I was a green belt. She was like a white belt from Texas, and she just picked me up and threw me across the mat, which was like, okay, great. Just don't get on bottom and you'll be fine. So yeah, there's been a lot of divisions that have been combined, even with like when I was a teenager, even I was always combined with the boys anyways. So it's just fighting boys and fighting men is just normal.
Is that so you said kind of you didn't know how good you were initially. Were most of your training partners men? So were you like was there very few women in classes with you?
Yeah, there was always only just 2 or 3 women, and they pitter in and out. But yeah, mostly training with guys. And to me, that was just fine because I was like, you know what? If I'm learning to protect myself, I'm going to imagine a scenario against somebody who's difficult. I'm going to imagine a man. I'm going to imagine someone who's strong. I'm going to put myself progressively in a harder and harder situation and find a way out of it, as opposed to just, there's some kids in the kids class we have, they're like, we don't want to train with the boys. And I'm like, who's going to go bully you at school? Not just girls. Boys are too. Who's going to end up kidnapping you? Boys. And as soon as I said that, they're like, let's go train with the boys. I really like trying to make training as close to real as possible because I feel like jiu-jitsu without its application to a fight has lost a lot.
So like a lot of do you do any techniques I mean, obviously you train for sport a lot of times. Do you feel like there's you kind of veer closer to the side of like self-defense and kind of try to incorporate that into your sport jiu-jitsu?
Right now, I'd say I'm closer to the competitive side, but generally speaking, yes, I love to be closer to the fighting side of it because that's priority. And a lot of things about like the type of base and the kind of smarts you have for it are just more protective. But obviously for competition, some of them are not good strategy. And the same with competitive jiu-jitsu. You wouldn't exactly go berimbolo somebody out on the street. They're just going to punch you in the face. So you got to know which one applies in which circumstance.
Yeah, and I think that if you have a good understanding of both, that you can kind of discern which one you need to have for a particular situation, because I mean, like for the most part, like, I mean, even like watching your matches, nothing that you did there were a few things where maybe you sat back for a leg lock or something like that, right? But you weren't necessarily like flipping upside down and hanging there in a position like that or something like that. So the jiu-jitsu that you displayed was still a relatively, what I would consider sort of close to fighting jiu-jitsu. That's what I don't even call it really self-defense anymore. I call it just like fighting jiu-jitsu. If I was going to fight someone, like, would this be a good strategy? Like getting a takedown, getting on top, putting pressure on them, like that's all good stuff, right? And then, but if you need to do something that's more competitive, if you have a good understanding of that, you can always sort of practice discernment and be like, okay, I'm going to do this particular thing in a competition realm, but obviously this is not something I would do in a fight.
Yeah, of course.
Do you feel like you were kind of talking about some of the girls that like promoting them to kind of train with the boys? Do you feel like now you're starting to? Do you feel like some kind of responsibility as a successful jiu-jitsu practitioner who's a woman to like kind of lead a certain path or lead the way, like to bring more women into the sport?
You could say that. I didn't feel particular to women, though I guess I'd be a very good example of it. I just felt like as I've learned and as people have taught me, there's a certain obligation that comes to teach what you have learned, especially to the people who have helped you. So I've always made it a point to teach not just the women, but anybody who's new at the gym, because I want to give them the same skills I have. I want to allow them to experience the same joy, the same fulfillment, the same success and creation that I have with jiu-jitsu. But yes, of course for women too, to show them that they are capable, that there are some things that do work better for us, and that it's possible. It's not just a man's sport.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. So I answer like a lot of questions from people online and stuff. And one of the questions that's popped up recently, and I've talked to some of the women in my gym about this as well, and rolling with a guy and then rolling with a woman, it's like it's a different experience. Even me is like when I roll with women, like they're typically more flexible in certain areas. Not always, like sometimes they're more rigid, but typically they have a certain flexibility in them that most of the guys that I roll with don't have. And the way that they roll is differently. But I was talking to even like one of my brown belts, and she was telling me that, she rolls with the guys and then she'll roll with the women, and it's a different experience, and that she's getting ready for a competition, so she's trying to focus more on rolling with the women because she's going to roll with women in the competition. And she's like, it's just different when you roll with them. They're a little bit faster. They're more slippery. They get out of certain stuff differently. Do you find that there is a difference in like rolling with women in competition and rolling with the guys in your gym? And if so, and here's the question that I'm posing to you that asked a lot of times, is a lot of women train and they don't have a lot of women to train with because obviously it's just the nature of the beast. It's a male dominated sport, and women classes and things like that are growing, but they're still mostly guys. But they roll with guys in the gym, and a lot of times the guys take it a little bit easier because they're bigger or whatever. And then over time, like they say that then when they go roll with women in a competition, women are super like aggressive. They're coming at them and they're not used to it. How did you, in a gym that was dominated mostly by men, do you notice a difference between rolling with men and women? And if so, how do you prepare for rolling with women if you're in a gym that's rolling with mostly dudes?
So I think a big difference between men and women and how they fight or how they roll at the gym is that men, they may use technique, but they're a lot more inclined to use their strength and physicality. And women, if they don't have that, they'll be way more inclined to be incredibly technical and fast. Not that men can't be both of those things too, but women will fall back on technique way more often than men will. Men, if they get stuck, I feel like they're more inclined to see where they can power through different movements, where they can be more explosive, and women will just be like, okay, I got to find some weird, innovative, flexible way to get around this because I can't just push you off me. And then your second question, what was your second question again?
The second question, really the main question I would like to ask, if you have any perspectives or ideas on, like I said, a lot of women have told me that they train in a gym with mostly men, and then when they compete or if they roll with a woman from like an open mat or something like that, the women that they roll with are far more aggressive and they're not used to it, and they're just it's a shock to them the way that the women move. They say it's just different. And so if you've trained in a gym that was mostly men at some point or maybe still is, how do you prepare for, say, rolling with a bunch of women if you're predominantly rolling with guys? And if you have any ideas on that.
I will say for guys, it took me a minute to learn this. There are some positions I will and will not play with men, just because it's too easy to get squished. I try my best to keep really stiff with like China wall. Like anytime you do a knee shield, anytime you put your feet on their hips to create space, you just have to deal with a lot more pressure. So you need to be a lot more solid and a little bit more static with the kinds of pressure and control you use with your hands and your legs. Because the fight can be a little bit more technical and less pressured with women, I feel like there's a bigger emphasis on finding your control quickly and using speed and technique to get to some sort of dominant position, which can be very difficult the more strategic and the more technical they are. But I think that would be a big difference between the two that I've noticed.
Okay.
Well, what about like, so you kind of talk about your coach. He's been with you since the start. A couple questions there. Like, what do you think that he saw in you from the beginning? Because you kind of, he knew you were doing really well and saw that you were doing well even before you did. What was it that he was maybe alluding to that you were doing, or what did he see in you from when you were like a younger kid, just getting off starting in jiu-jitsu, that you thought maybe you had some potential?
I think he thought that I was passionate, that I was clever, that I was intelligent, and that I was determined. I don't like to yield. I don't like to quit. I don't like to give up. And I think that makes for a really great mix for jiu-jitsu fighters, someone who wants to be unyielding and unrelenting, and somebody who's also wanting to be creative and ingenious and discover. I think that makes a good mix. And he probably saw those qualities in me when I was younger, and I was just thinking, cool, let's do this move. Like, cool trick.
So you kind of, I guess, like there's a book, Grit. Have you ever read the book Grit?
No, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, probably what you're describing is you were gritty. Like you were just not somebody who quit. Like you would kind of fight till the end and wouldn't give up, and kind of just continued. Like even though if time was running out, I don't think you ever kind of gave in, so to speak.
No, not at all.
I think, go ahead.
I think training jiu-jitsu helped develop that even more, and like giving me even more of a work ethic and ability to handle pain and to tolerate pain. Jiu-jitsu, I think, is really good, and MMA, they're both really good at developing grit in someone, and I think it helped to kind of hone it and refine it for me.
And then like your family dynamic, do you think that started like from a young age? You said you had brothers or a brother, like, and did that start from like when you were a young girl, just kind of growing up and
Yes, I was one of the younger siblings, so I definitely got beat up and pushed around by my older siblings. And to start jiu-jitsu was kind of like, yes, now I can learn how to defend myself against my older siblings.
Is that like, and you talked about your dad bringing your brother in. Did your dad have a specific interest in jiu-jitsu? Like, is there a reason why he chose that martial art for you guys to partake in?
Not in particular. When my brother started, he actually started with kickboxing and Muay Thai and MMA. And then when I started with everything. My dad had done some martial arts when he was younger, and he'd done some with my older brothers, because I have a couple older brothers. He'd done karate with them, or taekwondo or something. And I think he just knew that learning to fight was important. And he happened to find a gym that was close to home and had good ratings, and just went and hooked us up.
Nice. Where are you guys located at?
Ogden, Utah.
Ogden, Utah. Okay.
Not a lot of gyms out there.
There's a handful. They're in a
Handful.
couple different cities. There's only like one or two others in Ogden.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, that's not like to have you win the ADCC trials and being from Ogden, Utah, is probably a big deal.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I mean, for your gym at least, right? I mean,
It's a big deal in general, but
Yeah, but I mean, well, it's a big deal to jiu-jitsu people. I mean, if you went up to some random person in Ogden and said, "Hey, I won the ADCC trials," they'd be like, "I don't even know what that is."
Yeah.
But obviously, to our gyms and stuff like that, it's a big deal to us.
yeah.
So when you were coming up, you said you competed against guys. I'm just curious because I find that interesting seeing that because like I remember like one of the first women that like in the jiu-jitsu scene that was like really big that was doing a lot of competitions of like in co-ed like tournaments was Hillary Williams. I think it's her last name. She was like super tough. And I remember she was the one that threw Gabby like with the throw. Yeah. What was it like coming up as a teenager and being in the competitions competing against the guys?
To me, it was just a normal thing because that's how most of the time training was. So for me, it was normal. That's just
Gotcha.
how
So
it was.
you've been fighting your older brothers when you're younger, fighting the guys in the gym. So it was just more business as usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me. Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
What about like your first tournament or like maybe a first victory or win? Was there something, or is there even a moment that was like kind of really special that kind of motivated you or kind of was a good springboard to just kind of get more serious about jiu-jitsu?
So maybe I'll say my first competition. I didn't compete for the first like year and a half, 2 years. Like I planned on a couple competitions and then a couple of them fell through. So I finally did my first competition and you really have no idea what to expect. You can't anticipate how it's going to feel. But then I remember after my first match, after I calmed down a little bit, I was like, okay, so when do we get to go again? This is fun. Like, can we go more? My first competition, my very first fight was against a boy. And then I fought 2 girls and then another boy. But yeah, it was like, yeah, let's do this again. When do I get to go again? My coach is like, see, I told you you'd love it. I told you you'd want to go again.
Mm-hmm. What did you love about it?
It's exciting. You're feeling something. You're feeling adrenaline. You're feeling alive. You're becoming capable. You're tolerating more. You're expanding yourself. I think all those avenues of discovery are thrilling.
Are there any matches that stand out to you that were, I guess for lack of a better term, tough, or matches where maybe you went through more than what you thought you were capable of, but something that was like, it was a really tough match and you did more than what you maybe even thought you could during that match?
In a match, no, not necessarily. If I could think about it a little bit more, I could probably think of a couple matches.
Sure.
But usually that was all gone through in training. Usually my limits were pretty pushed in training. So come time for the fight, it was just like, hey, cool, this was easier than training. We can do this again. Like, which I think is how it should be. Ideally, you should be training harder than your fight is going to be so that the fight is easy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's what they say, right? Like, train hard, fight easy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like just like as far as your training goes, like throughout the week, are you getting in, because you're pretty young. How old are you?
Just turned 22.
Yeah, so you're like, I mean, you're like in your prime, like physically, so like your body can probably withstand a whole lot of tough rounds. Like what's your training like, maybe outside of when you're not prepping for a competition? Are you getting a lot of tough rounds in? Are you training every single day? Do you have recovery days? What's that schedule look like?
So training outside of a competition, to me, sometimes is more intense than training in the competition, but it's really similar. I think the only thing that changes come inside of a training camp and outside of it is how much focus goes into it and how much priority goes into it. So closer to a training camp and inside a training camp, there's more focus on what I'm doing and how I'm living and mental preparation. And then when I'm outside of it, it's just like, all right, let's just work hard. Let's just see what I can be. And that can be really fun for me. So as far as training is just hard either way. I just like hard training. That's what's satisfying about it, is feeling something and getting better. That's satisfying. So training outside of it, rounds, we always just train hard rounds. Depending, like we might go 6-minute rounds, we might go 12-minute rounds. It just depends on the day, what coach is feeling like, what we learned that day. Training will change, but it's always just hard training.
And then in your competitions this past, just recently at the trials, had you gone against, because I know that a lot of times jiu-jitsu ends up being kind of this like little small world where you'll end up facing people again and again. Had you gone against any of the competitors that you beat previously?
Yes. In fact, all of them but one. My very first match on the first day, I hadn't gone against her before, but everybody else on day 2 I'd gone against before. Wow. And the last 3 I'd went against, before Paige was going to the finals, it was lined up where I would be fighting all the people I had lost to before. And I haven't lost to very many people, but all of the ones that I had lost to were going to be lined up for me to fight one right after the other. Starting with Maggie Grandotti. I fought her at a Pan Am's or a Worlds a couple years back and lost just barely. Elizabeth, I lost to her a couple times at American Nationals before, a couple years ago. And then Kendall, I lost to at the previous trials by points. So I was stacked up to fight all the people I had lost to before, which is going to be like, this is going to be an intense day, like a day of redemption, I guess. And then Paige ended up going to the finals. And I had fought her before at the previous trials, and she was really athletic and aggressive, and I just barely beat her on points. And then you saw how the finals went there, which was surprising, but cool.
Yeah, it was a good performance. How did you feel like, because you said you lost to Elizabeth before. I mean, during your match, it was a pretty dominant performance. How did that feel?
Good.
Yeah.
I just kept focused. I think I just knew what I was going to do, and that's what I was going to do. Whether I won or whether I lost, I knew what I was there to do. And I just had my mind set that I was going to fight hard. I was going to work. I was going to move. And we were going to see where the fight went.
When you were going into the match, was there any like sort of chatter in the brain beforehand, like the fact that she'd beaten you before, or was it just kind of at that point like it's just a different day?
No, different day. It was all gone for me. I had too much focus to allow any thoughts like that to come into my mind at all. As soon as they did, I just immediately destroyed them and kept focused on this mentality of what I was willing to do and what I was going to do.
So you did the East Coast trials, right? Got second. What did you learn from that experience, and what did you change going into the West Coast trials?
To be myself and to trust myself and all that I am. There were several opportunities in each of my fights that I noticed that I didn't trust myself to go for something. And that would have made a world of difference in each of my fights. And that's exactly what I took to this trials. And it all set in a different way than I anticipated for my very final match. Like I started trusting myself. I believed in myself. But then before the finals match of this one, I had this epiphany where my perspective was so good about the tournament and about myself, where all of the pressure and the fear and the stress about it left. And I was left with this like freedom, this feeling where I could do anything. And I was excited to create whatever I wanted in the match. And I was absolutely willing to do whatever it was I intended to do in the match, which is the neatest thing to have at the pinnacle of the night when you are your most stressed, when you're feeling the most intense, when you're feeling the energy of everyone around you, and you're like, oh, take a deep breath. And to feel free right then was like, it was the coolest experience.
Yeah, the being in a competition and being able to, like you said, be yourself, or be like 100% in yourself, rather than, like you said, be with the crowd that's watching and be with the emotions that are going on instead of just being with 100% yourself. That's a fun feeling. And it usually takes a long time to get there. I feel like for a lot of people, but it's kind of like something that almost unlocks like another level in your game. So like you said at the previous trials, you were kind of almost like what ifing yourself a little bit during the matches, like not pulling the trigger on things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then so this one it was just like that was out the window. Then it was just 100%.
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool.
Were
Yeah, it
you
really is.
did it like weird you out that like you're used to having these certain little stresses or little anxiety going in, but not having that? Were you like, I should be feeling this and I'm not? Is something wrong? Did you have
Well,
any kind of
Well, I got to feel it for 2 days constantly. It was just once I got to the finals match
got
where a
you.
lot of the stress left me. The focus doesn't leave,
yeah?
Right.
but the fear or anxiety or stress, that all left. But the focus never leaves because you can still, like every single match, because it seems like you wait longer and longer for each match. Sometimes
Mhm.
the competition, each match, it was still a challenge to keep yourself mentally focused and keep preparing for the next one. And there's never a moment of just, oh, I can just rest. Your body might be sitting there, but your mind is still staying on this track where you don't lose it until it's done.
Yeah, and with ADCC, you get a nice you got a nice long rest. I remember I did the trials back in 2018, and each time between the matches, I was getting 45 minutes to an hour, which I prefer. It reminded me of being in wrestling again, where it was like we got an actual long time to rest, opposed to like if you go to like an IBGF, sometimes they just run them through really fast, and you don't have much time to rest.
I like it better that way. I like
Do
it.
you? I hate it.
Yeah, okay. The most I might need to rest between the matches maybe 10 minutes, but I like to be like, because rounds at the gym are that way. They're like, okay, switch partners,
Yeah.
you just keep going. And I feel like once I find a good endurance pace, then I
Mhm.
feel like I can keep going. I found my flow, I found my timing, my technique, an optimal level of aggression where I have bits of explosiveness. I like to just, okay, give me a few minutes and we'll go to the next match. I don't takes forever. You're
Oh my
sitting
god,
there, you get cold.
Dude,
I'm the opposite.
That's-
I think it's because I'm getting old, bro.
That's the difference between a 22-year-old and like a 30. You're 36 now.
37. Yeah.
37-year-old, but you were like 33 at the time.
Whatever it was.
That's the difference right there. Like you need your time. Like, oh my god. And let me tell you, I bet you felt great after the ADCC trials. You were like felt like you got hit by a bus.
Oh, bro, I remember. Well, I remember the match with Devontae went to overtime, and I got out of there like barely
He's
won the damn
such a
thing.
monster,
He's a strong dude, and I got out of it and won. But I remember I was like over on the side, and I'm just like looking and just exhausted. And then I'm like, thank God I've got like an hour in between
Yeah.
this. I was like, because if my old ass would have got out there like right afterwards, the dude would have given me so much more trouble.
How did you feel after
funny.
were you like fresh, like ready to go? Like I can do another 5-6 matches.
No, that's what was surprising is after every match, I felt good. Like I felt like I could just keep going, and I was like after I fought my semifinals, I got off the mat, and a minute or two later, I was like, I feel good. Shouldn't I be like super exhausted? But I guess I prepared correctly. I prepared well if that's the case, where I'm not exhausted and I still fought hard, but I'm not dead.
Yeah. Well, and you had some great performances there. So, like, I mean, you were in most of the matches. I mean, I remember I saw the semifinals and the finals, and later on went on Flow and watched the other ones. And I mean, you were pretty dominant. I mean, it was like, you'd have some good scrambles, and you brought a certain level of intensity, like going for front headlocks and takedowns and stuff like that. But I mean, I think Elizabeth was probably your longest match, right? And even then, you were in pretty good control for most of the match, So it's like I felt like you were in like a really good. You were positionally dominant from the whole time, and I feel like that kind of it's a nice thing because then it's like because you're in a good spot. You're working hard, you're going for stuff, you're going for submissions and everything else, but you're not having to defend someone else's stuff as much, and so it puts you in a strong spot where you walk off, you're like, I feel pretty good, like because you're not getting attacked as much, and you're not having to defend as much, and you're not having to, what's the word that I'm looking for? Basically, have to play someone else's game. You're playing your own game the whole time, which is nice.
Yeah. You want to have control as opposed to some sort of desperate control or even a desperate defense. You want to be able to have control over what you're doing.
What did you do between those between the matches? Like you know, or what were you doing to kind of stay? Obviously, you're staying focused. Like physically, what are you doing? Are you moving around? Are you trying to, you know, some people will sleep between matches. You know, some people can lay down and sleep. I don't know if you're one of those people. I'm not one of those people. Like, what are you doing physically just to keep yourself loose and to keep yourself kind of in that? Because if you overdo it, if you move too much, you could fatigue yourself a little bit. So what are you doing to kind of keep your energy under control?
At ADCC in particular, a lot of it was just physically for me, like maybe moving around a little bit, stretching a little bit. But most of the time it was just keeping my body relaxed and not too tense, and just keeping my mind under control. Because after I warmed up with the first match, I was like ready to go. And once I got a couple matches in, the matches started coming more sequentially, like there was less time in between them. So then I didn't have to keep myself as warmed up. But the first match is usually like you have to warm up a lot for that one. And the second one maybe a little bit, but after that I feel like I found my pace, or I've warmed up enough for it.
So here's a couple random questions for you about related to competition. Do you have a favorite snack that you like to eat during the day, right? Because all of us as competitors know like snacking and eating throughout the day is kind of important most of the time, because otherwise you'll go through the whole day, especially if it's like a long tournament. You get to the end of the day and you haven't had anything to eat. And then the other one is, do you have any superstitions? Like when you compete, do you have any like little rituals that you go through, or wear like a lucky shirt or anything crazy like that?
Okay, let's do snack first. Depending on the tournament, not really like I have favorite snacks, but one that I always bring with me, I don't really have one. I know I should bring something to have little bits of energy throughout the day, because you're not eating and you're performing all day. So I'll usually have something like a granola bar, or protein bar, some fruit. After this last ADCC, though, the first thing I ate afterwards was a little thing of fruit snacks that I had. I really like fruit snacks.
Like after the competition was over, or during it?
After, like the very first thing I did once we went over to my stuff after ADCC is I grabbed the fruit snacks. My coach has this picture of me eating fruit snacks in the hall.
Was that your after competition sort of reward? Like, all right, I'm gonna eat some fruit snacks.
Sure, you could say that. And then your second question, superstitions. Like, I know I used to always wear the same rash guard when I'd compete. It was just that was just my competitive rash guard. But with IBJJF, having you wear the color of your rash guard, the color of your belt, that just became the thing I always wore, was my rash guard. I do have a certain set of like clothes that I always wear when I compete. Like I pick the same undergarments, I guess, and the same, of course, the same rash guard, and usually the same shorts. Every now and then it changes if I get a new pair. So I guess you could say I wear the same clothes when I compete. As far as anything else,
you have a favorite song you like to listen to? Is there
I actually don't listen to music.
Not
when
at all.
I compete. When I'm preparing, I don't listen to music at all. I'm completely in my head. And it's not that I'm against it. I'm usually relying on my own ability to create my focus and create the aura that I want to fight with. And music, for me, in the sense of where I'm fighting, would be to remove persistent distractions from my thoughts. That's what I would use music for. Other than that, I kind of create what I'm thinking for my fights myself.
Is there anything like about the tournament, the ADCC specifically, that you've won? Is there anything that surprised you, like your performance or somebody else's, or the experience in general? Anything that was like you didn't expect that maybe was interesting?
The tournament itself was different. It was like a mix. Not only was it 2 days, which there's only one other tournament that's really like that, like the Nationals. So there's this focus that goes on from day to day, but it goes in between a vibe of like a normal traditional tournament to this like super fight, thing when you get to the finals and the semifinals. So it becomes more of this big show. And so that was kind of interesting to feel the difference in atmosphere a little bit when you started doing that. I felt like the tournament was long, like just how long I felt like I was always waiting and keeping my mind still just seemed to go on for forever. And I honestly didn't know if it was ever going to end. It was just always like life was just this now. It seemed that long. And I learned how to do that no matter how I was sitting, no matter how I was feeling, no matter what room I was in. I learned how to always be in the same like mental place. And that was kind of interesting. Another surprising thing was just trusting in myself and believing in myself and just how potent it was in creating my success. That was so surprising. You know, everybody says, believe in yourself and you will do fine. And you're like, okay, yeah, cool. But then when you actually do it and you realize your success came exponentially faster than what you thought you could do even, it was mind-blowing.
Well, I think that's a difference between, it's very much like jiu-jitsu, right? It's like you can say to someone, believe in yourself, and they can go, yeah, I believe in myself or something. But but you know, deep down, sometimes they still don't. Or there's a visceral, they don't feel it on a visceral level. There's a difference between like being in a situation, being faced with difficulty, and then really believing in yourself and feeling that like deep in your bones versus, yeah, I believe in myself. Just like you could say, like, you know an armbar. Great, you know an armbar. Have you used an armbar against someone during a live situation and actually felt that movement and know what it feels like to actually do it correctly? Those are two different experiences. And I think that a lot of times too, you know, when you put yourself in difficult situations and then you're forced to kind of deal with that stuff, I think it can create that self-belief and that trust in self that allows people to, like you said, have that exponential sort of feeling because of it as well.
So you're talking about instead of just thinking I believe in myself, feeling I believe in myself, knowing it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times, like because we're all trapped in our head a lot of times. We're all heady, right? Thinking a lot. But there's a deep feeling of, like when we train, like you can be training and you do something and you feel it. Like a lot of times it's not like you're not thinking about the thing and just boom, you react and you do it on this intuition. And then a lot of us, to create that belief, we go through these difficult trials throughout training or life or whatever it is that we do, and you put yourself through more difficult stuff. And by doing that, you then start to create this belief in yourself because you're like, I keep doing all this difficult shit and I keep doing fine at it. So eventually there's this point where you have enough evidence to be like, yeah, I believe in this because I'm good. I've got this. And when you can feel that on a deep visceral level, I think that's game changing, life changing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I understand you completely. My coach would always be like, "You're good. I'm telling you, you're good. You're capable of these things. You're doing well in competition." And I was always just like, I won. I'm cool. Like, but yeah, I feel like these last couple of tournaments, when I started seeing how valid his statements were and believing in them that way, like seeing like being able to trust his words that way and believe in myself a little bit more that way, then it was like, oh, like, yeah, I know this now. I see what you're seeing, which I didn't see before.
Well, a lot of times people can have a more objective view of us than we can have as of ourselves, right? We see ourselves a little differently. We're our own worst critic, whereas other people can look at us far more objectively at times.
Yeah.
Can you like, as far as your coach, you know, you've been with him since you started training. What is that relationship like? You know, how do you guys kind of interact, and like how does it? I mean, what's so special that you feel like, you know, a lot of your success, you know, obviously you've been trained by him, and a lot of your success is probably related to the gym and him as a coach. I think everybody's got a unique relationship with their coach, someone that guides them and helps them achieve these things and kind of sees things sometimes that you're incapable of seeing yourself at the moment. What's that relationship like with you and your coach?
We are very close. It is legit like Rocky and Mickey. Mickey's Rocky's coach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just like that. It's like this interesting boundary between like a mentor and almost sometimes a father and a coach, and me being a student and something like something like an apprentice or a legit part of his family. That's kind of, it's a very interesting dynamic. And sometimes we're too close, and sometimes we fight. And then we have to get over it so that we can both train efficiently. But yeah, every tournament I go to, he's there. He's the one taking me to all the tournaments. He's finding me sponsors, and we're going and training together in Las Vegas. And we're just, all of our experiences with jiu-jitsu are just incredibly tied together. And all of the time we train and we learn from each other, or more, me learn from him. They're just very, very much connected.
When you say fight with him, like, what's an example of a fight between you guys?
So not very often is it physical, because I would die in that case. but sometimes, because we are so close,
Sure.
sometimes he'll criticize me and I'll feel like he's doing it in a very personal way. And sometimes I will speak out against him in a way that is like, most people would be like, yo, you're being disrespectful to the coach. And I'm comfortable with it because we're so close outside of the gym too. So sometimes we both like have to like play with these interesting boundaries of like keeping proper respect for each other, but also being close. It's difficult.
Yeah, I think those boundaries are stretched a little more than somebody that's just a student at the gym. I think you're more than the student. You're kind of, like you say, you're like an extension of the family, an apprentice. Like me and Chewy have known each other forever, and he's my coach, and he's been my coach for most of my jiu-jitsu. I'd probably say things and mess with him, and he'd mess with me in ways that we may not do to other people.
Sure.
But it's just because like we have that, that kind of that bond. And I think sometimes when you have that connection, it's a little closer, that coach can maybe get more out of you than somebody else that maybe is just teaching you. He's teaching you more than jiu-jitsu in some ways, teaching you kind of, a little bit more. There's something more to it that he's able to squeeze more out of you and get you kind of to a higher level.
Yeah, and you're right too. Like, he's not just taught me jiu-jitsu, he's kind of taken me under his wing to teach me other things about life and kind of be a mentor outside of the gym as well. So I would definitely say you're right. And there's more that he understands about me and knows how to draw certain things out of me that I don't think a lot of other people would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's and that's a good thing. I think when you have that connection, you're able to get more out of your potential.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about like, are you a full-time athlete now? Are you a full-time practitioner in jiu-jitsu?
Yes. What is?
Well, like, I would say, like, is this your main job? Is this like, are you going to school or doing other things, or have you kind of devoted kind of your path to being like a jiu-jitsu athlete? Because like at 22, some people are in school and college doing other things, working, other jobs. Like, what are you doing? Or is this kind of like the main thing that you've kind of started to focus on? If it is, when did you make that decision?
Yes, I have worked and I have been in school the whole time I've trained.
Oh, okay.
This last year before the trials, I did stop working though, because one of my school classes conflicted with the work schedule too much. And that opened up a little bit more time to put more time towards school and towards, training and teaching.
Yeah.
I think that schedule's kind of followed over into this year too. Instead of working a normal job, I've just worked like at the gym, like helping my coach teach and teaching other people, teaching private lessons and things. And I have balanced out school to be a little bit more accommodating towards training jiu-jitsu. But I definitely need something else outside of jiu-jitsu anyways to like balance my time in jiu-jitsu. For sure, I'm that way. And who wouldn't want to add more skills to your repertoire anyways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think like, you're getting something to take your mind off a little bit of jiu-jitsu, because I mean, you can't just be on it. I mean, I guess some people can, but it's hard. You seem like you're kind of a thinker, and you like to be, mentally stimulated and do different things. I think, it makes sense.
So what are you in school for?
Right now the program is called Rehabilitation Sciences, but that just sounds fancy for something along the lines of athletic training and physical therapy.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I'm curious then. You're young, so you're in this kind of this interesting stage of your life where you're like moving into adulthood, where you've basically got like a lot of choices in front of you. What if you could, pick your destiny, your path if you will, what would be your chosen path? Would it be like a full-time jiu-jitsu person, something or other, or would you be doing like competing and stuff, and then be doing something with this study that you're doing in school?
Probably both. Right now, I know I have my goals for ADCC and for Worlds, and seeing just what I can accomplish as an athlete. But I don't think I would ever just only do jiu-jitsu, because there's so many avenues you can pursue in life, and so many things that can add to jiu-jitsu, and so many things that can balance it. I would always be learning something else at the same time, and it helps in different ways. Like jiu-jitsu applies to life in a couple different ways, and life applies to jiu-jitsu in a couple different ways, and so does everything else.
That's cool. I did want to ask you about I like to kind of get this idea on gi versus no gi. Like, I want to know kind of your philosophies on it. I think some people have very, very different ones. Now you've been successful in competitions as a gi. Obviously, ADCC is no gi. Is there like one way you like to train, and do you manage or adjust your training based on what you have going on, at competition wise?
Most of the time we keep our normal schedule of training, gi and no gi every other day of the week. Most of the time we keep it that way. Sometimes if we're really close to something big and you want to hone in on some particular details of gi or no gi, sometimes we'll dedicate a little bit more time or more of the classes to one or the other, just to be a little bit more specific and to be a little bit more versed in like what you're going to play when you fight. So if that answers your question.
Yeah. Do you think they're complementary of each other? Do you feel like there's a lot of overlap, or do you think like they're kind of become these kind of separate entities in jiu-jitsu?
There is a lot of overlap, but there is several ways in which they are separate as far as like strategy and control goes. And those are all pretty obvious to most people. Gi, you have more control. You have to deal with the grips before you can do anything. No gi is a lot more explosive. You have to get somewhere really quick, and you have to find a much tighter type of control because it's so explosive and slippery. So they each have their dynamics, and that would be one of the things you're honing in when you dedicate some specific time to each one, is like, okay, how do I make sure to close the space especially tight right here? How do I make sure to always win this grip fight? How do I, how to be specific in what you're training for?
Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you like to maybe hone in on a technique if you're working on, if like say something new, for example, leg locks, or even just some kind of other submission or position? Is there something you do? Do you have a process that you kind of attack a new technique or a new skill set that you want to add to your jiu-jitsu?
Learn it right, drill it, do it. Just learn how to do it right, and then go do it in the fight. Like, do it under real pressure to see how you're really going to respond, how they're really going to respond, and how well it's actually going to work.
So here's a question I have about that. So when you're learning the stuff, so do you prefer to do something like, let's say, for instance, if you're trying to pick up like a new guard pass, for instance, would you try to, or do you guys, because obviously your coach is running some of the stuff, do you guys do like a lot of situational rolling from that position to like put time in position and to have resistance and be focused on it? Or do you guys just say, all right, just do some full rolls and then you take it upon yourself to focus on it?
Both. Sometimes we start from the position, we have to work with specific goals. Mm-hmm. And sometimes your personal goal is to get to that position and see if you can do it, see if you can use it. So a little bit of both.
Okay.
It's good. Yeah. Is that like do you do a lot of drilling? Is drilling something that you kind of incorporate into your training consistently?
Yeah. If there's something that I feel like I'm not doing quite so smooth, or something I really need to get habituated in, yeah, we will drill it until we make sure like my brother and I, we will drill to make sure that our body is remembering the habit, so that we don't have to think, so that we can just go, we can react, we can respond. And that's faster than thinking about it. And then if it's something you already understand, like if you already have the concepts down and you can just change a detail or two, then you might not need to drill that as much. It just depends on what you feel like you need to be well versed in what you're training.
Nice.
Awesome. Any favorite positions? Last one. Do you have like a favorite position you prefer, or a submission you love to hit in training, or even in tournaments?
I don't know. I like it all.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Whatever you give me, that's what I like. What you leave for me is what I like. What works is what I like.
Is there a particular submission that you have used more, like you probably have more wins with than others?
Probably armbar or choke.
Arm or choke. Okay.
But I really like leg locks too. So I don't know, everywhere.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, leg locks are fun. I've started kind of, that was a level of the game that I didn't really do a ton in because I was more of a gi person based on schedule. But I really love leg locks. I think they're just, it adds up a whole new element, makes things fun. It just kind of freshens it up, and I think it's you have to know it at this day and age, especially in the no gi grappling scene. So yeah, I think it's a fun thing to incorporate in. Well, so Chew, you got anything?
No.
Good.
Yeah.
Amy, real quick, is there where can people follow you on social media, or is there like anything about your gym or anywhere where people can kind of get in contact with you?
Sure. So you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram at Amy Campo Fighter. And you could also follow my gym's page, Mori Zenith. That's my coach's page. He posts about stuff all the time. I would like to give a little thank you and shout out to my team and my gym and my coach. My coach is Eduardo Mori. Trained with him from the day one. He's raised me and all that I am as a jiu-jitsu fighter. And I really appreciate how my team has raised me up, have been my training partners, have supported me when I was at my weakest and cheered for me when I was my strongest, and how they have sponsored me to send me to all these places to compete and given me the opportunity to show my skills and to develop them and to become something out here. And the affiliation, Drysdale and Zenith, they've, as long as I've trained, we've been a part of Zenith and Drysdale's gym, and he's given a lot of coaching and advice to me and to my coach, and that has meant a world of difference to both of us. So I want to say thank you to both of them.
Awesome. Super cool. Amy, thank you for being on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, best of luck. Good luck at ADCC.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast today. Again, if you guys want to support the podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. You could, should you be listening to this podcast with a application of some sort or on a website that allows you to give it a review. Reviews can be helpful if you've got like a thing that lets you get stars or thumbs ups or whatever the hell it is.
Thumbs upsters.
we would appreciate it if you think it's worth it, of course. I mean, if you've listened this long, you probably think it's worth it. Probably,
yeah.
Sure. I mean, if you're still listening right now, you're probably like, I mean, come on. Now, granted, if you're driving, I'd rather you not drive and text or mess around with your phone because that can be dangerous. So just do it later on. It takes like 2 minutes. Next time you're sitting on the bathroom, doing your business, just be like, hey, you know what? I like those guys, and I'm going to take care of them, and I'm going to give them a little something.
Yep,
a little review.
That's right, and it helps grow the podcast. It does help us continue to get noticed and maybe get the podcast out to other people that can enjoy it as well.
And the other ways that you can support the podcast.
Ooh.
By thanking our sponsors.
Yeah.
So thanks to Charlotte's Web for being a sponsor. They help make the podcast possible. And again, I really like their products. Eugene likes their products. It's the reason why they're on the podcast as a sponsor. Any of the sponsors that we have, just so you guys know, they've been vetted by us. We've tried their products out. We like their products. If we don't like their products, they're not a sponsor.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. Because for you guys, understand this. For you guys that are listening, you might be one of my students. And if you're not one of my students, I'm going to essentially treat you like you're my students, because I wouldn't want to screw over my students, because again, just like you guys understand, there's a bond of trust that kind of comes from there. You don't want to break that. I don't want to like back in the day. I remember years ago. I remember these, and I've talked about this story before. Seeing like coaches who were doing this. They had this crap called Body by something, and it was just basically it was like protein drinks. It was like soy based protein,
nice.
And it was like a multi-level marketing company, And so basically they're like, yeah, if like you do this much, you get a BMW or something. You get to drive BMW, something like that. And I remember a friend of mine was peddling it, and I sent him a message like, hey man, is this stuff good? And he's like, oh dude, I'm making so much money right now. I'm making like $2,000 extra a month selling this stuff. I'm like, $2,000? I was like, for like selling your students' trust? I was like, no man, I'm good. I don't want to do that. I was like, that's not a good exchange. I was like, because that's temporary.
Yeah.
So I don't like that idea. So again, anything that we put on the podcast is actually a product that we like. Just a heads up. I just couldn't do it otherwise. Personally, that's just me. Again, some people have no qualms about it. And we're relatively choosy about the sponsors that we've had on the podcast, and we get offers all the time, and most of them never amount to anything because they're either not willing to work with the conditions that we want, or because I don't like their products.
Usually it's the products.
Yeah, usually I don't like the products. Like we had a protein bar company, like our protein company, and they like sent us the protein. It was terrible. The protein powder was awful, and then the protein bars were like they were so terrible. They're
chalky or something.
I mean, dude, it literally was like the chalk that we use at the gym. Like I think I could probably just slather.
It's like sawdust.
This is delicious.
It was awful. I was like, are you guys even trying? Are you even trying?
And so, and from a business standpoint, if you guys want to hear, like, this is with my own self-interest. This is not like this is not my own, like, I mean, I believe that most people are more self-interested, right? And so this is not from the standpoint of like, I'm some sort of benevolent guy or something like that. I mean, I don't want to screw people over, but also from a branding or business standpoint, I don't want you to associate me with shit. So like, I don't want you to get something and be like, man, this was going to be great. Oh God, this product sucks. And then you associate Chewy with like crappy protein powder, right? So, and then you're like, and then then I'm in here talking about something else you're like, I don't know. The last time I tried something, Chewy screwed me over. So that's the whole thing with it. So with that said, I really love Charlotte's Web's products. And if you'd like to try some of their stuff out, you could do so with a 20% discount by going to charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. Again, my encouragement to you, if you've never used CBD before, is try it out for a month. See what it does for you. Again, everybody's different. Everybody responds to medications and supplements and vitamins differently. So again, try it out and see what kind of effects you feel from it personally, and then you can make your decision going forward from there. My encouragement is not for you to use it forever, but just to try it. And if you try it and you like it, then you continue to use it from there. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com. If you guys are looking to get some new gear, some new merch, t-shirts, shorts, rash guards, anything jiu-jitsu related, if you'd like some high quality stuff with some really cool designs, check out Epic Roll at EpicRollBJJ.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Acorns.
Acorns is an app that modernizes the way you manage your finances. It works in the background of your life by combining banking and investing into one seamless experience. Basically, every time you get paid, Acorns can invest a piece of that. And every time you make a purchase, Acorns can invest your spare change into portfolios that grow with time. Start with investing with Acorns and get a $20 bonus in investments when you sign up at acorns.com/jiu-jitsu with a $5 investment. So again, when you invest $5, you get a $20 bonus just for signing up, again, by going to acorns.com/jiu-jitsu. Remember to consider your investment objectives before investing. For further information, including risks, visit acorns.com.
And guys, also, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. In the podcast, we have a podcast extra with every single guest that we've had on the podcast, including Amy. So there's going to be a podcast extra inside the members area of the Patreon. So if you're already a member, you can go access that now at the time of listening to this. And if not, well, it'll be up for you in case you would like to check that out. And also, if you would like to join my Chew Crew email list, you can become a subscriber by going to chewjitsu.net/join, CHEWJITSU. That's Chewjitsu/join, JOIN. We're spelling today.
Good.
And by doing so, you'll get access to 3 free ebooks, and along with it, you'll get my daily email where I share ideas. And again, it's the email. It's going strong. It's crazy. I think about the email thing. So like thousands upon thousands of people like read that thing. It's almost up to like 6 figures, thousands.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
That's incredible.
That's crazy. And like, a lot of people like a lot of people in that list read the daily email. It's pretty nuts. So again, you guys want to check it out, you can go there and do that. And otherwise, thank you guys for being here today, and hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you next week.